We're continuing Unit 5, which is about cognition, which is memory, thinking, and intelligence. Solving problems and making decisions. Problem solving, strategies and obstacles. Algorithms, a methodical logical rule or procedure that guarantees solving a particular problem, for instance, an algebraic formula. Heuristics, a simple thinking strategy that often allows us to make judgments and solve problems efficiently. Speedy but error-prone, for example, trial and error. Insight, a sudden realization of a problem's solution. Obstacles to problem solving. Confirmation bias, a tendency to search for information that supports our preconceptions and to ignore any sort of contradictory evidence. For example, the anti-vaxxer movement. I'm not going to talk about that. That's just what I wrote down. Mental set, a tendency to approach a problem in one particular way, often a way that has been successful in the past. Forming good and bad decisions and judgments. Intuition, an effortless, immediate, and automatic feeling or thought as contrasted with explicit conscious reasoning. Representative heuristic, judging the likelihood of things in terms of how well they seem to represent or match particular prototypes may lead us to ignore other relevant information. Availability heuristic, estimating the likelihood of events based on their availability in memory. If instances come readily to mind, we assume they are common. Overconfidence, the tendency to be more confident than correct, to overestimate the accuracy of our beliefs and judgments. How is overconfidence related to happiness? I have lovers and then something I can't read, but probably to actually ask someone out, you have to be overconfident in yourself, and but if you never ask somebody out, then how will you know if you're in love with them or not, Well, that sort of thing. I don't know, I'm assuming that's what I meant when I wrote that. Belief perseverance, clinging to one's initial conceptions after the basis which they were formed has been discredited. Again, anti-vaxxers, just say it. Framing, the way an issue is posed, how an issue is framed can significantly affect decisions and judgments. Introduction to intelligence. Intelligence is mental quality consisting of the ability to learn from experience, solve problems, and use knowledge to adapt to new situations. Intelligence test, a method for assessing an individual's mental aptitudes and comparing them with those of others using numerical scores. And then Spearman's G, general intelligence. I was supposed to summarize that right here, but I didn't. But it mostly measures mathematical and analytical skills, and it doesn't really measure anything else. And there are a lot of other kinds of intelligence we've learned that don't have to do with math and logic. Savant, I don't know how to say this, but it's SAVANT syndrome, or savant, something like that. A condition in which a person otherwise limited in mental ability has an exceptional specific skill, such as in computation or drawing. Many people with savant syndrome also have autism spectrum disorder. I don't think people really get diagnosed with savant syndrome anymore, but I'm not sure. Then I was supposed to summarize Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, which I didn't, but basically, there's a lot more kinds of intelligence. Like, you can be smart about things that aren't just math and reasoning. And Gardner's 8 intelligences are naturalist, interpersonal, intrapersonal, bodily, kinesthetic, linguistic, spatial, musical, and then logic, mathematical. There are quizzes online you can take to see which one you are if you want to. And there's, yeah. Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligences includes analytical, creative, and practical intelligence. I didn't even write down anything for social intelligence, but social intelligence just is basically like social skills. So how good are you at working in society and getting what you want while also making sure everyone else stays happy? That's pretty much how you tell if you have good or bad social skills or social intelligence. And then emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use emotions. And then it says, do people with bigger brains have bigger smarts? What lobes specifically? I have frontal and parietal lobes, but I don't have a yes or a no. I'm assuming that it would be yes if I wrote down what parts. But I don't really know. I do know that in the past people have measured other people's heads and then said, oh, well, because your head is smaller, that makes you less human. And that is not at all what this is saying. Those people were wrong. Don't believe that. The size of your head does not determine your worth in the world. And also, I think, don't quote me on this, the size of your head doesn't determine the size of your brain. People do have different sized brains, but, you know, within your head, like, the thickness of your skull can vary, and so can the amount of fluid that you have within your brain area that's cushioning it inside of the skull. And then, like, so your size of brain. Also, I think what they mean by this is that when you're a child, your frontal and parietal lobes aren't fully developed, I believe. There's parts of your brain that don't fully develop until you're 25. So when you are young and don't know much, you are not smarter and your brain is smaller. So in that sense, yes, that is correct. It still doesn't make you less human. It just means that you're a child and you don't think like an adult yet, which in some ways is good, but in a lot of ways is not. What do brain scans of smart people reveal about efficiency? They use less energy to solve problems. Assessing intelligence. What kind of things did Galton test as a measure of intelligence? Reaction time, sensory acuity, muscular power, and body proportions. I don't know why. Binet's mental age, the chronological age that most typically corresponds to a given level of performance. If a child has a mental age of 10, that probably means that he's 10. Did Binet believe that children are slow because of genes or environment? He said genetics. Terman's Stanford Binet is a widely used American revision of Binet's original test. The intelligence quotient is that mental age divided by the test age. Mental age divided by chronological age times 100 is your IQ. So if a child has a mental age of 10 and a chronological age of 12, their IQ is 83. Is IQ still calculated like this today? No. The term IQ today represents test takers' performance relative to the average performance of others at the same age. What was Terman's goal for the use of intelligence tests? To take account of the qualities of children in original endowment, save the world through education. Achievement test, a test designed to assess what a person has learned. For example, an AP test. An aptitude test is a test designed to predict a person's future performance, their capacity to learn. For example, a college entrance exam. And I believe I told you what an intelligence test was at the beginning of this section. So I'm not going to say it again because I don't remember. And the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale is the most widely used intelligence test. It contains verbal and nonverbal subtests. 4 different parts to the most recent Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale are similarities, vocabulary, block design, and letter number sequencing. Principles of test construction. To be widely accepted, psychological tests must meet 3 criteria: standardization, reliability, and validity. Standardization is delivering uniform testing procedures and meaningful scores by comparison with the performance of a pre-tested group. The normal curve. Most scores fall near average and fewer scores near extremes. So I was confused about what this meant in this class, but having taken statistics, I now understand what it means. So a normal curve is a bell curve, and it's there's a rule that I don't remember the words for, but basically there's it's 68, 95, 97.5. So if you divide it in half and then divide each half into 3 equal parts, the two parts that are equally away from the center will equal 68. Then if you move 2 parts more away from the center, it's 95. 2 parts more away, it's 95. It's 97.5% of whatever group. So, yeah. The Flynn Effect is that intelligence test performance is improving over time, I think. Reliability is the extent to which a test yields constant results, as assessed by the consistency of scores on the 2 halves of the test, alternate forms of the test, or retesting. Validity, the extent to which a test measures or predicts what it is supposed to. Content validity, the extent to which a test samples the behaviors of interest, for example, a driver's license. Predictive validity, the success to which a test predicts the behavior it is designed to predict. The dynamics of intelligence. In cross-sectional studies, intelligence over time gets lower, but in longitudinal studies, until late in life, it remains stable or increases. So, intelligence does not necessarily decline with age. Some kinds of intelligence does, and some kinds of intelligence does not. So, crystallized intelligence increases with age, fluid intelligence decreases with age, and now I will tell you what those are. Crystallized intelligence is our accumulated knowledge and verbal skills, whereas fluid intelligence is our ability to reason speedily and abstractly. Extremes of intelligence. Intellectual disability is a condition of limited mental ability indicated by an intelligence score of 70 or below and difficulty adapting to life. In the past, terms used to describe this were mental retardation. However, today, that's considered rude, and we don't call people that. Down syndrome is a condition of mild to severe intellectual disability and associated physical disorders caused by an extra copy of chromosomes. People with extremely high intelligence in school can be called precocious youths, whiz kids, talented, and gifted. Studying genetic and environmental influences on intelligence. Heritability, the proportion of variations among individuals that we can attribute to genes. The heritability of a trait may vary depending on the range of populations and environments studied. The heritability of intelligence is the extent to which intelligence tests score variation can be attributed to genetic variation. Are there specific genes for genius? Yes, but it's polygeny. Not sure what that word means, but basically I remember that the idea of it is that there are specific genes for genius, but there are parts of a bunch of different genes, and to actually figure out which ones would make your kid smart and then use CRISPR and stuff like that to genetically engineer for a smart kid would actually be really, really hard to do because there are so many nuances within DNA and stuff to figure out which ones will get exactly the right smart stuff and won't get anything that might be a negative thing that comes with that gene that we don't know about. It might just be better to have your kids the normal way, which is sex, the baby comes out, and as long as they're healthy, then it's cool. Abortion is fine, just so you know. Twin studies show about the environment contribution to IQ scores is that a better environment raises your IQ score, because relating to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's kind of hard to focus on your education when you're starving. So if two twins are like separated at birth, the twin that had better access to food, shelter, education, love might have a higher IQ score. It's still also changed by genetics, but if you don't have an opportunity to, exercise your brain muscles and work on the knowledge and the genetic good genes that you've gotten, then it will be hard to develop it later on. And as you age, genes become more dominant. Excuse me. So, group differences and the question of bias. So, genetic females, when it says girls and boys here, it means genetic chromosomes right now. So, genetically female people are often better at spelling, verbal fluency, locating objects. I'm not. Detecting emotion, and being sensitive to touch, taste, and color. I lose things that are literally right in front of me, that I'm sitting on, that are in my lap. My mom lost a baby she was holding. As in, she was like, "Where's my daughter?" And she was literally holding her. So, yeah. She was also, like, really, really tired with 3 kids. So, like, that's not her fault. I'm just saying, I am not the greatest. I could find other people's stuff, like, super easily. But my stuff, I'm like, wait, it's on the shelf right here, but it took me 3 minutes to figure that out. And boys are tend to be genetic males tend to be better at spatial and like kinetic movement type things, and being able to see objects and how they work, and like machiney type things in their brain. And then here it says that racial groups differ in their average intelligence scores, but that's because of environmental access to resources, and then specific cultures and what they tend to focus on in their education. So some countries just don't have a lot of money, and so they don't necessarily have the money to send their children in that country to higher education, which then could make it harder for them to score highly on an intelligence score. But that's not their fault. It's just because they didn't have the money for it, or they didn't have the resources to give them like the best food for brain growing. They just had to survive. That's not their fault, and it's not have anything to do with their race. It just has to do with the place that they were at the time that they were at. Or it might have to do with the culture, and that maybe the culture in a certain area feels like genetic females shouldn't be educated. That's not their fault for being females or for being that race, and it's not their fault for being in that culture. It's the culture's fault for believing that. But they have their own reasons, and like we can't. I don't really know how to talk about that, but just saying like racial groups differ in their average intelligence scores, but that has to do more with their culture and their life situations. It doesn't really have to do that much with, like, at all. It doesn't have to do with their skin color, except for the parts where their skin color can conflict with their education. For instance, when it was really hard for people of color to go to school in America, that wasn't their fault for being black. It was America's fault for being racist. However, their skin color did have something to do with it. It wasn't their fault, Okay. I'm trying really hard not to offend anybody, so please don't be mad at me. I'm trying. When do psychologists consider a test to be biased? When it's... I don't think I can read that. When it's not switched for the taker. I guess when it's like written to make one group seem better than another, like when you take a survey and they word it to make you want to answer in a certain way, that's kind of when a test would be. And in the psychologist definition of bias, intelligence tests are considered biased. The scientific meaning of bias is that whether it predicts future behavior for only some groups of test takers, or if it predicts for all of them. And in the scientific meaning of bias, intelligence tests are not biased. A stereotype threat is a self-confirming concern that one will be evaluated based on a negative stereotype. For instance, they did this experiment where it was written about in a book. I'm just reading exactly what is written down here by my teacher. It says, what happened to black students who were reminded of their race, but just before taking a verbal aptitude test, they performed worse because being reminded of something that you have conflicting feelings about, or that people would maybe want to make you feel bad about right before you do something, can make you feel bad about yourself, which then makes it harder for you to do well. So probably a similar thing with someone who has, I don't know, like for instance, my brother has dyslexia, which means that sometimes it's really hard for him to do reading. And he is at the reading level for his grade. He's actually doing really well. But it does make it really hard for him to read things sometimes, and so sometimes he'll just skim if he doesn't feel like taking the effort to do that, because it is a lot of work for him to do. And I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah, so if someone was talking with him right before he had to take a test that involved reading, sorry, my body is doing weird stuff right now. And they reminded him about that, then he might be thinking about it, which would probably exacerbate the symptoms. I don't know, because I don't have dyslexia, which is great for me. I appreciate that genetics. Sucks for him, but as far as I know, men are more likely to get dyslexia, just like men are more likely to get color blindness, red-green color blindness specifically. Okay, I'm losing my voice kind of, so that's where I'm going to stop for now. I hope you guys found this interesting. I'm not really tired yet, but I think I'm going to just take some pills and go to sleep, because I don't want to do anything else tonight. So, bye.